Okay, so in this tutorial we're going to cover a little bit how to use this digital model that you've produced to make an axonometric drawing that kind of illustrates the composition of the structure and the enclosure. So before I tell what I did, first of all was I just continued all these surfaces across so that my my framing is completely clad, completely covered. So I'm not doing that kind of like half strip away thing anymore. But we're going to produce an axon that has like a kind of ghosted, like some elements will be transparent so we can understand the order of like the elements in the assembly. So the first thing I want to do, as with any drawing, is to set up my view. If I go to the top left of my viewport, right click and go to set view, I'm going to axonometric, northeast. So you can do, this would count as a true isometric, 60 degrees. But you can do whatever angle you choose if you think that there's, a view that kind of makes more sense or will show your project better. And I would recommend you choose that view. So I'm going to tilt it a little bit. I'm also going to zoom out to make sure I have the whole thing in frame. There we go. I'm going to open the named view panel. Here I'm just going to hit save as. I'll call this my axon and click OK. Now the other thing I'm going to do in order to make this a ghosted axon is I'm going to make 2D the drawing in a couple of stages. So what I want to do now is turn off like all the stuff that kind of is cladding the project or is forming the enclosure basically. So I'm going to turn off cladding, the strapping, the sheathing, and I'm going to leave the window frames on actually. Oh, and turn off the second floor flooring. Okay. And then I'm going to make 2D, do that again. Do the score lines for my cladding as well. Okay, great. Right. And now I'm going to do make 2D. And I can select everything in my scene. If you're worried about the kind of processing speed, you can also use the command SEL, select visible, and basically make a window, and anything that is visible from your point of view inside that window will be selected. So we can, in this case you don't really see much, but there are cases where it'll speed up your make 2D by avoiding making 2D of objects that are not really in your scene. Okay, then in here I want to choose a couple things. I'm going to uncheck scene silhouette, and I want to make sure I have this option maintain source layers turned on. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Okay. And then if I go to another viewport, make sure I'm in top view. Should have a make 2D of that. Right, I'll move it out of the way for my next make 2D. Go back to my other viewport. Make sure I got the frame right there. All right. I'm going to turn on these other layers that I didn't make 2D the first time. Select them all and do a make 2D just of those layers. Okay. Then I'm going to go here and line them up. So now what I want to do before I'm probably going to compose, or I am going to compose this drawing in Illustrator. But before I get to that step, what I want to do is spend a little time organizing my layers and cleaning up my lines in here, because that's going to be a little more efficient to do in Rhino. So first of all, I'm going to remove a lot of duplicate lines like this, if I don't really need any more for this drawing. And I'm also going to, so let me do that. I'm going to clean up the line work first. And then I'm going to come back, so I'm going to pause the video, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how I'm going to organize the layers for line weights. I'll pause real quick. Okay, and I just wanted to show you one thing. You can also use Control-Shift and rotate your view obviously just like you would go to 3D, which will make it easier to select certain things. Okay, so I'm just, cleaning up lines that are like duplicate, like this, for example, is too close together. And I'm cleaning up, well, I'm also going to clean up lines where, like here, for example, we wouldn't really have a joint right now because we're not actually making a model anymore. We don't need to show that line in our drawing. It's just going to make it more confusing. So I'm just going to delete lines that aren't really helping us to explain what's going on. That right there. And then the same on my cladding up here. I'm going to delete some of these lines where I show, the kind of layers of different elements, right? Right, so I'm going to pause again once I'm done with this and come right back. Okay, so now what I want to do is actually kind of comb through and start to clean up some of the line work. So oftentimes, with a Make 2D, when you join or when you have edges that are joined by two pieces of geometry, you'll end up with kind of two, like lines on two different layers, like I'm seeing here. So I can clean some of this stuff up. What I really want to do is actually organize my layers so that I can easily line weight them in Illustrator. So if I expand my layers here, I'm just going to go here. I'm going to go from the top, basically. The first thing I'm probably going to leave most of the stuff as is. But what I do want to do is make a couple of silhouette lines to and highlight different elements. And I also want to make my section plane or my section cut lines a little darker. So I'm going to select a lot of those lines and kind of separate them onto a different layer. And I'm going to do those in a couple different line weights. So, like for example, the big stuff like the wall, the ground plane, the slab, I'm going to put that on one layer. And then I'll put like things I'm cutting through like window frames and, the wood framing smaller. I'll put that in a separate layer so I can keep it smaller, even though we want to turn the line weight up on that. And then I'll put this stuff where we're cutting through on the cladding and sheathing on its own layer as well, so we can kind of keep organized there. All right, so I'm going to pause and do that. Okay, so I've made a couple layers here, like my cladding. I put the, every part of this geometry that intersects the section cut on that layer. I decided to do the window frames the same, so pretty small. I did the same with the wood frame, as you can see there, and then also for the ground plane and the slab and everything like that. Get all of it at this. Okay. I'm just putting stuff on other layers. I'm also going to quickly kind of, so I want to be careful about the lines I choose to make silhouettes with. I don't want it to be kind of interrupting my drawing too much. So especially areas where we're like looking through something, I don't want it to be too distracting. I'm gonna use a couple of lines to just kind of silhouette some objects, but this is not a huge deal. We're not gonna. I'm gonna line weight, or I'm gonna silhouette these EMU walls. And probably also the ground. I'll make a new layer. I'll call it silhouette. You can also call it your profile line. That's what it is. And we can always add more silhouette lines later if we really think we need the help. Okay. Yes, we would also want this. Line. Okay, and I think we're pretty much in good shape. So what I'm also going to do now is I'm going to just organize myself onto a few layers. Because I have just too much stuff in here for the moment. And I'm just going to kind of go by like what I think the line weights are. If you don't have a good sense of like what lines should be on what layers, I would recommend you just keep everything separate. You can always play with it in Illustrator where you can actually see what it looks like. But I'm going to take, for example, these cladding score lines up here. The score lines for my CMUs. Put those on their own layer. Keep those pretty light. I might also take like, let's see, the window frame stuff can be on its own layer. Stuff is pretty light. Maybe like the window frame and the cladding. So make sure you have it all on that layer. Now you can also use this really useful command called purge. So I just moved a bunch of stuff off of certain layers and onto fewer layers. I use purge, or I type in purge and hit enter. You can see it'll help me delete stuff, and I'm not using like layers that don't have any objects on them and stuff like that. So that helps for those. And then probably everything else. I'm going to keep the framing on its own layer. Keep paving, slab. That stuff can also be layer as well. Right, purge again. I'm going to move all these out. So one thing you'll find when you export to Illustrator is that it'll remember your layers, yes, but it'll also remember, like every bit of information in terms of how the layers are nested, which we don't. A simple naming convention for our layers. So now I'm going to select this object and export it. Go to File, Export Selected. Save it under Save As Type, change to .ai Illustrator. And hit save, and under options, so if we save it, remember 1:1, then that will be half an inch equals a foot, because that's what scale the model is at right now. I can also, if we go from 1 inch to 0.5, then we'd be at about 1/4 of an inch equals a foot, which I think is really enough detail for this drawing. But I'm going to leave that up to you and your studio professor. But I'm going to do mine at 1/4 inch equals a foot. And then I'll go ahead and open that file I just exported. Okay, first thing we'll do is go to the top, document setup. You can also go file, document setup, hit artboards, and I'm going to put myself on a 24 by 36. Have a better sense of the scale there. Change back to my selection tool. Center that on the page. Okay. First thing we'll do is hit Control A or select all. Obviously, you can also go select all right there. And under the color panel, select the stroke, little outline, change everything to black. It's a lot simpler. I'm going to do that one more time. Select all, set it to the lowest line weight. Okay, and now I'm ready to start editing my line work. So in the layers panel, I'm just going to go one by one. Let's see. Actually, lines there. I could put this on the same as the medium here. All right. So the window framing, I'm going to go pretty light on that, 0.004. On the score lines, I want to go pretty light on that as well, 0.0025 maybe. And we could also actually just make this, if we select those lines again, and under the color panel with the outline selected, click the 3 button for the options in the top right and change to grayscale. We can actually change it down to like 70 or 60% black to kind of make those lines a little less prominent. Then for these lines, maybe I'll go 0.006, heavier lines. Framing, maybe 0.004 as well. Again, we want it to be clear, but we don't want it to be like, you know, small lines kind of competing and bunching together to make our drawing more confusing. Let's see, ground slab. So this is one of my section cuts. So this is where I'm going to go a little bit higher with the line weight. 0.014 maybe. Put our line weight there. For the framing, I'll go lighter, 0.008 again, just so we can make sure we, and still make sure we see it, really. For the cladding, I'll go even lighter, 0.006. And in the silhouettes, I guess the cladding shouldn't be any thinner than that. Let's scale it up a little bit. That looks okay. Oops, too big, 0.012. All right. So that's our line weight, line work pretty much composed there. This layer real quick. Okay. And what I want to do is I'm gonna add this overlay. Before I do that, I'm gonna actually also make a copy of it, and I'm gonna live paint it. So what I want to do is show the framing kind of within the cladding of the wall. So I'll go up here with this one, go to the live paint tool. You can hit K on your keyboard, or you can find the icon that looks like that. So I'm going to swap to fill. Doesn't matter what color I use for right now. And I'm going to fill the whole thing. Then I could go back and, oops. Get rid of areas that shouldn't be filled there. Okay, looks good. So then I'll go back to my selection tool, go back to my stroke, and set that to the white box with the red line through it. So I'm going to put this thing on its own layer. I'll make a new layer. Drag it down. I can hit Control Y on the keyboard to see what I'm doing a little better. And I know that this Control Y will just show the vectors, so I'm not looking at like the stroke weight or the fill or anything. And I know that this kind of lines up on top of where that piece of framing is, like that. And just line it up like that. If I hit Control Y again, I can go back. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is change this to fill color to white. And then I'm going to turn down the opacity to like 60% or something like that. Okay, now there is one area where I have a couple of these window frames that I kind of want to show in front of the sort of that like partly translucent fill there. I'm going to turn off all the other layers, and I'm going to make a new layer and go through real quick and just move these guys to a layer above. Or to a separate layer so I can put them above the part that I masked out. I'm going to pause real quick. Okay, so I just put a couple of those like lines on a separate layer there, just to show them in front of that kind of shaded area that I did before. And finally, I'm just going to grab this and move it as well. All right, and what I do want to do is make sure that that stuff is on a layer above. Oh, maybe I'll do that really quick. So we should have, if I remember correctly, we should have our section lines. That stuff, okay. That should go above the, call this our ghosted. We may actually want to put some of this stuff on its own layer and go above as well. And its own layer. Call that light above. Okay, there we go. That one wants to be above that ghosted layer. All right, now we'll move it into position. And again, we can hit Control Y to kind of see where we need to line it up. There we go. Okay. And we can always adjust the opacity of that guy if we want. We kind of make it a little more clear what's going on there. Great. So it looks like the all the section stuff can all. There we go. All right. And the last thing I would do is actually go through here and just clip some of these lines where I'm cutting through things. There shouldn't be too many instances of that, but just to kind of make sure it's nice and clean. So the way I would do that plain is just to use the cut tool. So you can get to the cut tool by hitting C on the keyboard, or I guess it's called the scissors tool now. It's also right under the erasers tool if you click hold there. And what I did was I just selected that line that I wanted to cut, which is the guy, and use my cut tool, and I'm going right to where that intersection is. And I'm just deleting that line left behind. I want to make sure I have the right line selected there when I do that. Oops. Which is one good reason to select it first. So for example, if I go in here, again with the cut tool, I want to make sure that I'm not accidentally cutting on the path where my intersection is. Cut far enough. There we go. Okay, so that pretty much sums up this tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. There should be another couple tutorials coming on the section perspective drawing.